that started a transformation. So in the work with the intergenerational dialogue, the most important part is to challenge, and in any dialogue, is to challenge our own biases, our own preconceived ideas, our own prejudices, and to actually open up our mind, see things from different views, from different perspectives. So in the mid-1990s, Sweden had just become a member of the European Union. And as a new member of the EU, it was important for us to show the engagement that we had already had for a long time with the Middle East and North Africa region. Around the same time, the Swedish government was approached and asked if there was an interest in taking over a beautiful old building on the Corniche in Alexandria. And a study was set up with a very senior ambassador and a very young myself in writing a study for the government, and this eventually led to the mandate for the institute. We then traveled around, the senior ambassador Sverker Åström and myself, for about 6 months. We met with people in the MENA region as well as in Europe and of course in Sweden, and we had discussions on what role could such an institute play. And the ideas that came up was then very much contribute to the European Middle East relationships, especially to the then emerging Euro-Mediterranean partnership, and to work on political, economic matters as well as intercultural matters, and to see how we could bridge on some of the key issues that are absolutely essential for our common future, be it on security, be it on climate, be it on economic development, or be it on simply understanding each other better. So that's the background. So first of all, setting up the institute itself has been a journey, especially since we started this process in 2019. At the time of the COVID hit in 2020. So there was a whole process of negotiating a host country agreement with Jordan, our new host, and the setting up in Amman. It was a question of finding premises. It was a question of recruiting staff and training staff. It was a question of, everything from opening bank account to trying to envisage the programs and the activities and the communication of the institute. So the big first achievement is actually the setting up of the organization and everything that takes, together of course with the program. And the program has been developed very much together with our colleagues at the Foreign Ministry, our embassies in the region, as well as colleagues around the region, from governments to civil society organizations to private sector. And we've tried to really see where could the institute have an added value? Where is it that Sweden have experiences, knowledge, know-how that could be of interest? And where is it that we have mutual interest in developing these collaborations and to see how we could take them forward? So that has been that is the first element that I want to highlight. The second one has of course been the development of these different thematic areas that we are working on. And these are not least the EU-MENA relationship at large, and where we over the last couple of years have seen a growing need. There has always been a need. There has been a need for the last 25 years and even before that to engage on these matters. But I would say at this critical point in time, when we are facing everything from security challenges to climate challenges to the absolutely essential importance of having more inclusive societies and involving and drawing on the perspective, the knowledge, the know-how of everyone, of men and women, of younger and older. So developing this thematic work on EU-MENA relationship, on intergenerational dialogue that I will be speaking more about later, on the agendas both for women, peace and security and on youth, peace and security, our work on the climate agenda, and where we also have come in very much from an inclusivity perspective. And then the last half a year we have also started working on entrepreneurship and innovation, as the engagement with the private sector emerged as one of the areas that we needed to look a little bit more actively on. So the first topic that I want to raise is the work that we have embarked on and are working on intergenerational dialogue, and where we have developed a guidance note on and a methodology on how to work with intergenerational dialogue. This issue came up as a suggestion to us throughout every meeting that we were having. When we were talking about peace and security, when we were talking about the climate agenda, when we were talking about EU-MENA relations, in whatever topic we were raising, the question of the need to bridge the existing generational gaps came up. So we tried to understand, what is intergenerational dialogue? How can it be conducted well? And in doing that, we engaged with a lot of different people, coming from all over the Middle East, North Africa region, coming from Europe, coming from a younger generation, from older generation. There were some meetings that were only with younger people, some only with older people. Most of the meetings were mixed and bringing in multi-stakeholders. And what we discovered was that, just like in any dialogues, it is absolutely essential to, first of all, start listening to each other, to create that space where it is possible, but also to find the connectors and find the mutual respect and mutual understanding in listening to each other, in engaging with each other, and seeing that we can all learn from each other, whatever generation we come from. But also realizing how we are all colored by our generational backgrounds, the experiences that we have had, what has gone on in society at the time when we were growing up, or in other important times of our life. So what has happened with this work is really that we have seen how people have come together, people who previously would not necessarily listen to each other. They would sit around the same table, but it would be a series of monologues rather than real dialogues. And in breaking that, by getting into the stories of how much we can learn if once we give each other a chance to get to learn from each other and get to know each other. Another area that I want to highlight is the area of the EU-MENA relations, where in particular last year, when Sweden had the presidency of the European Union, to support the Swedish presidency, we started to engage in some of the meetings that Sweden had followed very closely over the last few years, be it on the Euro-Mediterranean Partnership or be it with a broader relationship with the whole of the region. I think this was particularly important after COVID, at a time when all societies had been affected, when there were economic consequences, political consequences, social consequences, and there was an acute need of engaging with each other. Over the last few months, this has of course become even more important in light of the regional developments and how they have affected people, especially in this region, but also in Europe, in trying to understand, where do we come from? What are the things that we worry about, each one on their own side. And on the European side, of course, Russia's illegal invasion of Ukraine has had a very strong and very serious impact on the whole of the European society and security framework. And we need to explain, and we need to try to get across why those issues are important for us. But obviously it is also equally important that we understand the grievances, the sadness and the sense of injustice that this region is facing. Another area that we embarked on a couple of years ago was on the question of climate change and how to address the consequences of climate change that are particularly negative in the Middle East, North Africa region. And Sweden, once upon a time, 50 years ago, took the initiative to hold the first big environmental conference on a global scale. And in 2022, Sweden took the initiative again of holding a conference 50 years later and to see what had happened with the global agenda. So as the Dialogue Institute, we wanted to see how we could contribute to bring voices from the Middle East, North Africa region together, how these voices and people coming both from government agencies, coming from civil society, coming from media, coming from grassroots organizations, academics, etc., bringing people together to have discussions and to give us recommendations that we then could feed in to this global meeting and to the global thinking around where are we today when it comes to the climate agenda, and where would we like to go, and how can the concerns and the specific needs of this region be reflected in the global work. We all can learn from each other in a similar way that if we have an agenda set only by men, we're missing out on the 50% of the population who are women. It's not necessarily that one is better than the other, but it really is a question that we all come in with different perspectives, with different ideas, with different ways of seeing things, and thereby we can also be much more creative in finding solutions that are needed for today's problem. And clearly, the older generation, myself included, we have failed. And I think one of the reasons we have failed is that we have been stuck in too much of structures that have not been inclusive enough, that have not taken on board the perspectives of different parts of society, different generations, different genders, etc. So measuring impact, I think, is one of the most difficult things that one can do. And even more so when it comes to diplomacy and when it comes to dialogue. It is not that you can say that, like you can do with certain development projects or with a business, that we managed to sell so and so much, or we managed to build so and so many schools. So obviously we are talking about something that first of all has an impact over a very long period of time. It is not something where you see quick results, but where you can sow seeds for transformative change. And I do think that, for example, when it comes to the intergenerational dialogue, we have seen in many of our meetings that something has happened. People have changed, and that is impact, if anything. So let me give you a very concrete example. We gathered last year the MENA Coalition for Youth, Peace and Security in Amman for a workshop on, as we were developing the intergenerational, our thinking on intergenerational dialogue. And one of the first exercises that they had was to try to define what they think represented, or keywords that represented the young generation and keywords that represented an older generation. I was out of the room when this happened, and I came in and I saw a list of very positive things about the younger generation: creative, open-minded, fresh, engaged, etc. And on the older generation, it was primarily negative words and very much the opposite. There were also some words on experience, maybe someone even had said wisdom, but it was very, very stark differences between the two slides. So we then asked, so can you pause for a minute and think, if you had been from an older generation, what would you have been saying about the younger generation? And there was a complete silence in the room. And then you could hear that some people were even so moved that they had to keep their tears away. And then someone said, I just realized that I have made myself guilty of the same biases, the same prejudice that I feel subjected to by the older generation the whole time. I am also part of this. That started a transformation. So in the work with the intergenerational dialogue, the most important part is to challenge, and in any dialogue, is to challenge our own biases, our own preconceived ideas, our own prejudices, and to actually open up our mind to see things from different views, from different perspectives. Another measurement on our impact is when we see that people are reaching out to us. Big organizations, I mean, we are a small institute. We are some 7 people, all in all, with the program side and the administrative side. And yet we have large organizations that are reaching out to us and want to collaborate with us on all these different topics that we are working on. We're working with UN Women and the Swedish Institute on Women, Peace and Security. We have been working on gender equality with the Union for the Mediterranean. We have had intercultural engagement with the Anna Lindh Foundation and its networks. And most recently, we have been approached by the Jordanian Ministry of Youth, who in August will be hosting the big launch of an Arab regional strategy on youth, peace and security, and where we have been asked to do specific sessions on the methodology of intergenerational dialogue. The fact that we are being invited to share this work that we have developed together with the Swedish Government Agency for Peace, Security and Development, the Folke Bernadotte Academy, that we are invited to have this work presented for the Arab ministers and for all the other delegates, including youth representatives from throughout the Arab world, is in itself a testament that what we are doing is something that is needed, as you said earlier, that is something that is relevant and something where people want to learn more. And I think that that is also a sign of the impact that we can have, but it's not something that you can measure in facts and figures. When we were developing the thinking around setting up the Institute again and after the move to Amman, we realized that the absolutely most important part was to develop programs and activities that were relevant, where we could have an added value. And to do that, we needed to collaborate with others. We were not the ones who were owning a big issue or topic. We often, as a small organization, did not necessarily ourselves the ones who were sitting on the knowledge and the know-how, but it was other organizations. And our value was bringing people together, bringing in people who come from, as you say, the different walks of life, come from government, come from civil society, come from academic institutions, and actually put them around the same table to have conversations on different relevant topics. That is where we had our and have our strength and our capacity. So let me give you an example when it comes to women, peace and security, where we over the last years have developed very broad networks of contacts with different agencies, with international organizations, with women-led organizations, with civil society organizations in different parts of the MENA region, but also in Europe. We have brought them together for a network meeting once a month online on different topics. The topics are developed on the request of the participants who are coming to the meeting, and the expertise is coming also from the participants in the meeting. So depending on what the topic is, we had a discussion in March on the shrinking civic space. Then we had a couple of organizations from the MENA region and from Europe who were sharing their research, sharing their experiences, sharing their knowledge on the theme, and then open up for a discussion and for reflections among all other participants. We have had, in April, we had a meeting on coalition building. Then we invited a couple of the people who are experts on that, who gave the introductions and open up for a conversation. The most recent one in June was a meeting on the role that media can play, and where we had media experts who were speaking and then open up for discussion. So that is one of the many examples. Another example is the work that I mentioned earlier on climate change, where we in 2022, ahead of the Stockholm Plus 50 conference, were gathering people from throughout the region. We contacted our embassies in the region and said, who are your best contacts who are working on environment and climate in government offices, in universities, in think tanks, in civil society organizations. We specifically asked for gender balanced list and age mixed lists. We got some phenomenal recommendations. We also reached out to the Union for the Mediterranean. We reached out to other organizations and think tanks that we had been working with on this theme and asked for their contacts. And in the end, we had a list of maybe some 250 different names. And out of them, we invited some 80 people for a whole day online meeting, where we then made sure that there were people coming from all of the countries more or less in the region. So from Morocco in the west to Iraq or Iran, maybe even in the east, and with people coming from really all walks of life. Part of it was panel discussions, part of it was roundtables in larger format, and much of it were smaller breakout groups that contributed both to networking, where people had a chance to meet each other, but also to exchange ideas and come up with recommendations that were fed into the Stockholm Plus 50 conference. Another example is the last two COP meetings, COP27 and COP28, took place in the region, one in Egypt and one in Dubai, as you know. And for these meetings, we gathered, or before the meetings and after the meetings, we gathered youth representatives coming from the region, but also from Sweden, and people who had been going to a lot of COPs. So we had people who had maybe been to 7, 8 COPs, and we had people who went for the very first time to a COP meeting and had discussions and preparations with them. What do you need to know? How can you lobby actively? How can you network? This gave an occasion for these people to then meet at the COP. So we brought them together also at the COP meetings, and we've had discussions afterwards. It had given a chance for climate actors in Sweden to engage with climate actors in the region and to better understand what are the specific needs and challenges for this region compared to the challenges that we are facing in Sweden and Europe. So I think those are also examples of how the partnerships have been forged, they have been developed, and in terms of the substance, it is our partners and our participants who very often are the main contributors with the substance and the full contributors to the recommendations that come out of our meetings. It's a wonderful question. We actually had a planning day with the team at the Dialogue Institute last week, and then we had a discussion about values, and we both reflected on an individual and personal level of what was important, but what is also important for a team. And there are a couple of elements that I particularly would like to highlight. One is the mutual respect. The mutual respect translated in listening to each other, in engaging with each other, in being curious about each other, and to deeply respect each one as an individual with their strengths and their weaknesses. Another thing is kindness, and I think especially in a world that is as troubled as the world that we are living in, I think we all need quite a bit of kindness. I also think curiosity is an absolute key element in any kind of endeavor, but especially in the kind of work that we are doing. If you are not curious, you cannot have an open mind. That I see very closely connected to empathy and to try to develop the ability to put ourselves in the shoes of others. Question of responsibility, of taking responsibility, meaning both that we do what we are supposed to do, that we deliver, but also that we take responsibility when for one reason or the other we don't, or if something goes wrong. To actually have that courage to say, I made a mistake. So that is also something that I have tried to bring with me into the team, and to see how we could develop this mutual respect, the curiosity, the kindness, the responsibility, and the empathy in trying to also see that maybe someone made a mistake because they had a bad day. Maybe something had happened somewhere in their life. Or maybe it was just forgetfulness, or maybe it was a lack of clarity from my side in asking for something. The latest area that we have worked on or started working on is on entrepreneurship. And we had a fantastic pop-up event in Rabat where we gathered entrepreneurs from the Middle East, North Africa region and from Sweden. And among many of those who came from Sweden are of a diaspora background and have family roots in the region. One of the things that we were doing in the workshop on entrepreneurship was to have a discussion on maybe we can call it fail-ups. Namely, what is it that we all make mistakes, but as you just said, when we can learn from our mistakes, when we actually can see that the mistakes may be what leads us to do something better. And I think especially within an entrepreneurial context, that is very often the case. And I think entrepreneurs are therefore often much better than many others of not only admitting but embracing the mistakes and seeing them as the learning platform for creating something better for the future. And I think that is something that we, all the rest of us who are working in different other sectors can learn from, and that we can develop much more. So what we are trying to do is also every time we have a larger event, we have a conference, we have this visit to Morocco with the different meetings, then we have an evaluation and we look at what were the things that went well, that we will continue and want to do for the next meeting. What were the things that really didn't go well at all, and how can we avoid doing that? And what were the things that were somewhere in between and that we, by learning, can also do better for future activities? I have a very wide perspective on entrepreneurship, seeing it as the creative process of starting something new. That could, of course, be a business. It could be a social impact endeavor. It could be setting up the Dialogue Institute. I have very much felt as if I have been engaged in a startup, with everything that means, from occasionally sitting and working in a basement like many of my friends on the business entrepreneurship side, sitting in their living room, or maybe even locking themselves into the bathroom because the apartment is so small that there was nowhere else where they could have a quiet place. So I think it really is a question of the creativity that is an essential part of entrepreneurship. I start from the back, and we would never be able to achieve anything unless we worked together as a team. In setting up a new organization, and we have been we've had a particularly challenging period because it's been a lot of staff turnover for a big set of reasons, not least that 3 of my deputies were very quickly taken away because they got promotions. One became ambassador to Jordan, one became state secretary, and one became the president of the National Youth Association in Sweden. And so we've had a very high turnover, and that affects the possibility of forming a team. But we have been working really, really hard. And when I now look at a team that starts to be a bit more consolidated, when we have the full team in place, and when I see how by drawing on the ideas of each and every one, and having worked based on these values that we talked about, how I see more and more of an ownership, more and more of an engagement coming out of that ownership, but also more and more responsibility, because it really is not just the institute, or it's not the project of one person. It's our joint endeavors that have led to the creation. And I think that in the team, this has created a deep sense of pride of having been part of that journey, and of feeling that we together can contribute to doing things that are meaningful, things that have a meaning and importance for other people, and that hopefully can respond to some of the needs and can contribute to finding some of the solutions to the many challenges that we are facing. And let me just add there, I think that first of all, a team, even when you have the same people who stay in a team, it changes over time, because people changes over time. When you have people coming and going, and there are new people who are coming in and others who are leaving, that also changes, and there is a need to constantly work on it. So what we also try to do is to very regularly have discussions on, not only on the odd planning days, but every month to have discussions on the work environment, on our code of conduct. Is that still holding? Are there any problems that are coming up, either in the physical environment or in the spirit of the office? Doing things together. We had a wonderful public speaking training earlier this spring, and that really brought the whole team together. And after that, we have used our all staff meetings where we all, in the past, used to have check-in questions, and then for a while we used them to continue to train on the public speaking. So each one came in and gave a presentation on a topic of their own liking. Now seeing the work that we are doing on communication and the wonderful collaboration with you, that has also given a whole sense of the team that this is an area where we all want to be engaged, both the administrative team and the program team. And I think that is wonderful, because when we work together for something and we learn together, then we also come together in a very different way than if we are living in our different separate silos. And given that we as an institute have as a goal to break silos between people of different cultures, countries, backgrounds, different walks of life. If we cannot do it within our organization, how can we possibly attempt to do it with anyone else? So I think we really need to first work on ourselves, or in parallel work on ourselves while we are engaging. And I think we are learning a lot from our external exercises and our internal exercises, and they become mutually beneficial as well. What we have done over the last 5 years has been to build the foundation of a work, a foundation of clear pillars in terms of thematic areas where we can make a difference, a foundation in terms of networks and contacts and partnerships that of course can be expanded and developed and so on, and a set of recommendations coming out of the different meetings that we have held that also can be picked up, can be looked at, and that can inspire for future meetings and other activities. I think that this is a question that first and foremost should go to my successor. who will be coming in August and take over the Institute. She will, of course, build on the work that we have been doing, and the key areas that we are working on are likely to continue to be the same areas that the Institute will continue to work on for years to come. But my vision is that the work that we have engaged in on the intergenerational dialogue, that will continue to inspire our internal work, our external work, and that the methodology will also be used by other organizations. My hope that in a similar way that we are now, or many organizations, when they are now planning for a meeting or a conference, and they think of not only having men on a panel or not only inviting one group or the other, I hope that we will have a similar kind of outlook in saying, okay, we're going to have a discussion on the economy, on climate, on entrepreneurship, on whatever topic, and that we in that panel make sure to also be inclusive in terms of bringing in people from different generations. So I hope this will be, for lack of a better word, something that can be mainstreamed in the world, and my vision is that this will continue to work. My vision is also very much that the Institute will continue to play the role it has played for the last 25 years and has further enhanced over the last few years in the dialogues on the relationship between the Middle East, North Africa region and Europe. My sense is that this dialogue is more important than ever. It is at a time of crisis and challenge that we need to sit down and to listen to each other, to try to understand each other. We may not always agree with one another, but at least to understand each other better, to respect each other, and to try to see where we can find a common ground and how we can develop solutions to solve the challenges that we face together and that we need to solve together. So that is a key element, and connected to that is also the whole question of intercultural dialogue. I think that the work that we have been doing over the last few years on women, peace and security, on youth, peace and security, has really made a difference, and we have become one of very many actors, but we have become a trusted convener. So I very much hope that the Institute will continue that work. And finally, the work that we have started on entrepreneurship was extremely interesting, fascinating and wonderful, and where I think we've managed to find a little niche where we possibly could do something that maybe not so many others are doing. By bringing entrepreneurs from the region together with entrepreneurs from Sweden, including entrepreneurs who originally come from the region, both to work on business solutions for a better future, but also to be the links and the bridges between the two continents in terms of broader understanding. We have in this worked very closely with the Swedish Institute, and they have for many years had leadership programs working with this region and bringing in young entrepreneurs in different training programs. Those training programs have also very much been a mutual exchange and a mutual learning process. So also building on the existing networks and creating these connections is something that is very promising and that I hope can be further developed by my successor. And I am really, really glad that it is a brilliant, wonderful colleague with a long experience, not least a long experience from this region, who is coming in, and I wish her all the luck and all the success in the future endeavor with the Institute and with the wonderful team.